Yo, Shortbox Nation, this is Botter, and I'm here to tell you right now that con season starts early this year with the return of Northeast Florida's premier anime, comic book, and sci-fi event, Collective Con. That's right, Northeast Florida's largest pop culture convention returns for its 10th year on March 8th through the 10th at the Prime Osborne Center in Jacksonville, Florida. 10 years of Collective Con, they're pulling all the stops out to make sure this is a can't-miss event. And the guest list they got going, don't even get me started on the guest list. I mean, they've got A-list celebrity guests and voice actors from some of your favorite movies, anime, and video games like Elijah Wood and Sean Ashton, Ray Park, Trisha Helfer, Ross Marquand, Max Middleman, and Bo-Katan herself will be there, Katie Sackhoff. Tell me what other convention is giving you the opportunity to meet Frodo and Sam from Lord of the Rings, Darth Maul, and One Punch Man all under the same roof. Only at Collective Con. And if you're looking to get some of your favorite comics signed, or if you want to get an original sketch from some of the best comic artists in the world, well, you're in luck, because there'll be plenty of comic and creator guests there, like DC comic artist extraordinaire Clay Mann, Harvey Award-nominated illustrator John Taylor Christopher, Marvel and DC cover artist Chris Stevens, and acclaimed Star Wars author Timothy Zahn. They'll all be at Collective Con this year. And if you're looking to bring the family, or if you want to make a weekend out of it, you're in luck, because there'll be so much going on at Collective Con that weekend in the form of vendors, fan panels, video game tournaments, cosplay contests, after parties, and a bunch of fan events. You can purchase single and 3-day weekend passes now using the link in this episode's show notes, or by going to collectivecon.com to book your tickets and hotel. Buy your tickets now, and I'll see you at Collective Con, March 8th through the 10th. Now let's start the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Short Box Podcast.
The Short Box Podcast is recorded live from Jacksonville, Florida.
Yo, Shortbox Nation, welcome back to the podcast. How is everyone feeling today? We are back to our regular scheduled programming. I hope y'all enjoyed the Patreon preview we dropped last week, and a big shout out to our newest patrons. And to all of our new friends joining us for the very first time, my name is Botter, here to welcome you to the Shortbox Podcast, the comic review and talk show where you hear the best conversations about comic books and pop culture inspired by them. This is episode 380, and this episode will drop a week before Valentine's Day. And most of you know by now, we've been trying to do more thematic episodes, sometimes according to the holiday and the season that we're in. We did a Christmas comic spotlight back in December, and then a spooky horror comic spotlight in October. And I was kind of stumped at first on how I would do one for this holiday if we were going to do any of that. But then I had the bright idea of calling on some friends who host an amazing podcast, a critically acclaimed podcast at that, that's all about love and relationships and the heartbreak that happens in comic books. They are my favorite married couple in comics. Their names are Brad and Lisa Gullickson, and they host the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast, one of the most unique comic podcasts out there. And I'll get them introduced here shortly. But first, we need to acknowledge the people that make this show possible, starting with our incredible sponsors, Collective Con and Gotham City Limit. One is North Florida's premier pop culture event, and the other is North Florida's premier comic shop. Both are the best at what they do, and they both play a large part in helping us keep the lights on. And since I was talking all about our Patreon community last week, I would be doing a giant disservice to this show if I didn't highlight the role that our Patreon community plays in supporting this show as well. Our Patreon community consists of the best supporters a podcast could ask for, their friends, their family, and their hyper fans who encourage us to keep this show going, and they help us bring you the best episodes possible. So shout out to every single member in our Patreon community. And if you haven't made the personal decision to join the best comic community on the internet just yet, what are you waiting for? All right, you're missing out on bonus episodes and the ability to vote on episode topics. There's no better time to become a member of our Patreon community than right now. Simply click the link in the show notes for details, or go directly to patreon.com/theshortbox. With all the acknowledgments out the way, let's set the table for our esteemed guest today. They've been called, quote, the best couple in comics by Eisner-winning writer Tom King, who happens to know a thing or two about comic couples. And since 2018, they've explored the various dynamics of comic book relationships throughout pop culture and publishing history. And they've picked the brains of some of the best comic creators in the industry. And I challenge you. This is a challenge from me to all of you listeners. I challenge you to find a better intro song on any podcast. I've tried. You're wasting your time. Don't even take me up on that challenge. Short Box Nation, let's give it up for Brad and Lisa Gullickson. Hey, Brad. Hey, Lisa. How are y'all doing today?
Hello.
Thank you so much for having us, Jinx.
I love that quote from Tom King, and I am now going to reveal the truth behind that quote.
What?
You're like, it's AI generated.
Yeah. Well, it's not AI generated, FAI art. We had Tom on the show once before. We went to meet him at San Diego Comic-Con, and then we ran into him at New York Comic-Con. And by ran in, we stood in line to get our book signed. And we had our copy of Human Target with us. And we handed over our copy of Human Target, and he wrote, "To the best couple in comics, Tom King."
And we're like, yeah, we're adding that to our Twitter bio.
And I was like, that's press. You know what you just signed to there? That's press.
It's
We're
even
using
more
that.
legit. If only we had a notary as well. It would be notarized, but
That is fair game. Hell, if I would have grabbed your book, I would have used the same code on mine. The best couple in comics spotted. There's only one of you. I know. But Tom King said it. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
he did.
You two are based out of Virginia, and I'm curious, what's the comic book scene or a comic community like up there? Do you guys have a favorite shop that you go to?
Oh, we have lots of great shops up in our neck of the woods. We've been shopping at Big Planet Comics for the entirety of our marriage. I've worked at Big Planet Comics for comics, never for cash.
yeah, for store credit.
For store credit, I've worked at Big Planet Comics. They're the best. But you know, we also hang out at Four Color Fantasies whenever we're in Winchester, Virginia. We have recently partnered with Four Color Fantasies to host a series of comic book movies at the Alamo Draft House in Winchester, Virginia. And we're super excited about that. They're a great shop. They're an Eisner nominated shop. But
Wow.
like I would say the community is really strong. And there's probably within driving distance a half dozen comic book shops.
We're really
Oh, wow.
spoiled where we are.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I've never heard of Eisner winning comic shop.
nominated.
Nominated.
They didn't win.
They're
were
winners in our hearts.
Yeah, they're winners in our hearts. Yeah.
I am so glad I'm getting to experience the Gullickson effect, because when I listen to your podcast, I'm like, they have to have a good script. They have to practice like the banter between them and just landing your jokes on at the same time. But no, it's not the case at all. Like, I'm witnessing this firsthand. You guys are just naturally charming and funny.
Oh, that's very kind. We do have a script, but it's terrible. So.
Yeah, we do a script and we take a lot of notes.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa takes a lot of notes. And that's probably why we can never get our episodes out on a scheduled
Oh,
day.
you're making it sound like my fault.
No. I'm not. The notes, we both do a
Bail,
lot of
Brad.
We
notes.
both, it takes a lot of research.
Yeah, it takes a lot of research. And that's why we're always late, Lisa.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, Lisa, it sounds like me and you are the same in that way, because when I send my outline to the rest of my crew, they're like, Butter, it's a hour-long show. It would take me 5 hours to go through just the first segment notes you got. You know, I'm like, guys, you want to do it or not? We're doing it right or not?
Dude, when you sent me the questions, I was just like, okay, me and Botter are going to get along. I like to prepare my thoughts. I do not like to think on my feet.
Yeah, I'm the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Like when we do interviews, Lisa will have read every interview the creator has done, listened to every
Nice.
creator podcast, and you know, write 6-7 pages of questions. And I will do no research. I'll think of one question and then I'm off to the races.
Yeah. And I think that we actually complement each other
Oh,
in
yeah.
that way.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I hope so.
All right, Brad, let's put the spotlight on you for a sec, because I read your bio, and I understand that Marvel's RoboCop 2 adaptation from the 90s, which, by the way, I didn't know ran for 27 issues. I thought it'd be like one of those 5-issue miniseries, but lo and behold, to my surprise. So I understand that was your first comic, and that's what got you into the medium. What memories come to mind when you think of that first comic?
I mean, when I'm thinking about the RoboCop 2 adaptation, I have very warm, nostalgic feelings for walking into Joe Gumbinger's comic book shop in Burke, Virginia. Rest in peace to both the shop and to Joe. And I can see that shop in my mind's eye right now. I can smell that shop. It was split down the middle. You had comics on one side and a used bookstore on the other side. And actually there was like a couple counters for cards, trading cards, baseball cards, that kind of thing. Like I have nothing but fondness for that shop. It was also a shop that was not very kid friendly. So I was 10 years old when I walked in there, and they were never overtly friendly. They became friendly, but it took years of going there before I ever really felt comfortable going there. That was very much like a 90s comic book shop. But I was thinking about this the other day. It's actually not the first experience with comics I had. It was the first experience I had with comic books.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, when I was real young, the first comic book character I ever encountered was Batman. And it was through those like children books that came with a cassette tape. And so it was like partial children's book, partial comic, partial audio experience. And I remember just reading and listening along to that book when I was like 4 years old, 5 years old, over and over and over again. And we recently uncovered a photo of me with that book as a little child. So I guess technically that was my first experience with comics.
That is like a blast from the past. Do you remember those, like the packages and you would have the audio tape on the bottom and then with the book?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I would love to get that book back. Like, you know, I've gone on eBay to look at it. I found it. It's not super expensive, but it's also not super cheap either. But then I'd also have to buy some sort of cassette player because I don't have one of those anymore.
I think a record player actually has a cassette player in the front.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
It was a full multimedia experience. It was so ahead of its time.
Yes.
Yeah, and everything made out of paper and tape. Like, just really no digital elements at all.
No.
Lisa, what about you? What's your earliest comic memory?
I didn't grow up reading comic books. I didn't start reading comic books until I was in college because there was a cute boy who read comic books, and I was like, oh, I can do that too and be cool.
It's true.
We're no longer together, me
Thank
and that
goodness.
person. But he did turn me on to comic books, and that was good. Growing up, we read comic strips. So the ritual every morning is that everybody takes turn with the funnies, and we would point to the funnies and laugh over them, and Peanuts and, you know, Kathy. And
Did you have siblings?
yes, I have 3 siblings.
Okay.
Gross.
Yeah. I'm the third of 4. And every night, my mom would read to us, and we would get one Bible story and one book of our choice. And many nights it was Calvin and Hobbes, Calvin and Hobbes books. And we've owned them in the long form. We own the big brick. Like, Calvin is probably where I get my sense of humor and my vocabulary and my darkness. Like, all of that comes from Calvin and Hobbes.
Existentialism, yeah.
Yep.
Imagination, yeah.
And your dad still breaks out the newspaper when we come over, and he saves the funnies for us to look at.
Yeah, it's his love language. And
That's sweet.
my grandfather would do that too. My grandfather passed away in 2020, but like up until the end, he was 101. And up until the end, he would cut out comics, put them in an envelope, and mail them to my dad. Like, that is
awesome.
how, that was just one of the ways that they communicated, you know, and they're both, they're from the Midwest, so any kind of communication is good.
Even if it's through snail mail. I like it.
That's right.
Well, that's awesome. So it sounds like even though, you know, you didn't dive into the world of, you know, quote unquote, like comic books, or comic books in the sense that a lot of people think of, which is maybe like the superhero stuff, 22-page comic books. It sounds like comic books has been a part of your life for a long time.
Absolutely. And then the first comic book series that I read in college was Sandman. So it's not like I started with like the conventional, like where a beginner would start with comics. I was just like, hey, where's the deep end? I'm going in there. And I was confused, and I we're now doing like an issue by issue talk through Sandman on our Patreon, and I'm really getting way more from it the second time around. One of the things I struggled with when I started reading comics was just like panel layout. And I feel like starting with strips, like it creates this expectation that every 3 squares or something, there should be something you can pull from it. And then going from that directly into Sandman, where like the panel layout is not straightforward intentionally, it really was a challenge. And it really took like a concerted effort to teach myself as an adult to read comic books.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, Sandman's one of those reads where it's like sometimes it's like left to right, and other times right to left, and sometimes you got to read it backwards and upside down, you know, and hold your breath sometimes.
Yeah. And even just teaching myself to actually look at the pictures. Like I would finish a comic book and I go like, I didn't understand any of that, and then I realized, oh, I just read the words. I forgot to look at all of the pictures. I have to go back, look at it all again.
On the topic of early beginnings and the start of things, if you don't mind regaling me and our listeners, how did you two meet, and what sparked the idea for the podcast?
We actually met 17 years ago today.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Get the hell out of here.
I started working for Barnes & Noble at Reston, Virginia in 2006, and I met Lisa on my first day of work, which was 17 years ago this very day, the 5th of February.
Listeners, I told you that this episode would coincide with Valentine's, and I was having a hard time figuring out an episode to correspond with it. Brad and Lisa came through. I didn't even know this was a welcome surprise. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I was hired as a bargain lead at the Reston Barnes & Noble, and Lisa was a part-time bookseller. And over the course of that year, we got to know each other a little bit more and more. And by 2007, we were dating. And by 2009, we were married. And we've been married ever since then. And that's, that's it, right?
That's how we met.
That's all the details?
Yeah.
I like how Brad was like, Lisa, right? That's like fact checking, right? It's like, all right,
Well,
tell the real story.
We're leaving out all the saucy stuff.
Yeah. Because I left for Los Angeles in 2007. I was going to go become a Hollywood writer, and I went with a buddy across country. And by the time we got to Vegas, we were no longer friends.
Oh, wow.
And because Lisa and I's relationship had barely started, we had only been dating, but I was so excited about that relationship. And while we were on the road, I was calling Lisa like every night. And I was in Vegas, and I was like, well, do I continue on to LA or do I just go back? I'm going to go back. And so I drove back to Virginia, doing the top half of the country. So I did a whole circle of the United States. I hit as many states as I possibly could, and then right back where I started, and had to call up my Barnes & Noble manager. And I said, I know I just quit, but can I be music manager again? He's like, how about you be merchandise manager? And I was like, yes.
And you're like, oh, by the way, I'm dating Lisa.
Yeah, and is that cool?
And they're like, not really. Don't tell me that again.
Yeah, don't talk about it.
Minus the murder mystery and like C-list, Z-list superheroes. That really does sound like a Tom King comic book script right there.
Yeah, I would love Tom King to write our romance. Oh, man.
That is really
Somebody
sweet.
would die, though.
I don't know. Somebody would have to
It
go.
was probably the friend in Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Tom King, if you're listening, I mean, look, once human... Oh, he's writing, what is it, Street Kings now?
Oh, no, Danger Street.
Danger Street. Thank you so much.
Danger Street plus like Gotham Year One plus some secret project. I mean, he's got like 9 projects that he's working on at all times.
I think he would make an exception for an official CBCC adaptation right there.
Besides, he's just a writer. Writers have all the time in the world. It's not like an artist with multiple books.
Oh, man. All right. So where did the idea for the podcast come from? What sparked that idea?
Well, we had a podcast before Comic Book Couples Counseling, In the Mouth of Dorkness, that we did with our buddy Darren and Brian. And that was a movie podcast. It was like let's talk about the latest film that came out this week. Let's review it. Let's talk about other things that we're watching. It was modeled a lot after the Slash film cast, or what's now called the film cast, with David Chen and Jeff Kanata and Devindra Hardawar. Shout out to those guys. I love
For no
their
reason.
podcast.
They're doing great.
They're doing great. Their Patreon numbers are like insane. They have like a real job with their podcast through their Patreon. It's very inspirational. So we were doing that kind of thing, and we loved it. But we also loved it to the point where we wanted to do our own podcast where we didn't have to ask others.
Scheduling 4 people.
Oh, no, it's a nightmare.
To do a show is really hard.
Very difficult. Yeah. And anytime you had like a different idea to try out, you'd have to talk it through. And, so we just wanted to do our own podcast, basically. And Lisa came up with the idea for Comic Book Couples Counseling.
We knew we wanted to do something comic book related because that was an interest that we shared and loved and didn't really have another outlet to express at the time.
Yeah.
And then I also have always been super into advice columns, self-help books, and I was listening to a podcast called By the Book, where what they do is they take a self-help book and then they live by it for 2 weeks, and then they review like what that was like, which is a show that I was very into at the time. I no longer listen to, and I don't say that because it's not quality, but just that I can no longer vouch for it. But I was like, what if we did something that involved those two things, like the area of self-help and comic books?
And I can't remember if I said Comic Book Couples Counseling.
No, that was totally my idea.
Okay.
I came up with Comic Book Couples Counseling.
The title was Lisa's, I believe you. And when I guess when we just heard that title, we were like, ooh, Comic Book Couples Counseling. I just like saying that. And when you see it in a tweet, or if you see it on like a Facebook
it makes
post,
a person curious.
It just, there's nothing quite like it just through those 4 words. And I was like, ooh, that's something.
It's a very solid name. And once I got past like a month of just stuttering and flubbering over it, I would be like, Comic Book Couples,
Yeah.
It's a name that sticks once you get it. And I love the abbreviation too. CBCC is what I've been calling guys on the low.
I like it.
We wanted to cover Don Greenwood and Norrin Radd as experienced in the Silver Surfer run by Dan Slott and Michael Allred.
Classic.
But we didn't want them to be our first couple
because they're like that's like one of my all-time favorite, not just comic books, but like things on this planet. I love that run so much.
And you didn't want to mess it up.
Yeah.
So you're like, well, what couple could we use as a starter couple to to try this concept out on, but also not be embarrassed if we don't do it perfectly. And I was like, well, my first comic book couple that I ever fell in love with was Scott Summers and Jean Grey.
Come on.
Let's do a whole series of episodes on them.
So we paired them with the book, The 5 Love Languages.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much defined our entire run.
Yeah. And so since then we've done all kinds of couples. And we eventually did get to Don Greenwood and Norrin Radd.
Episode 50.
Not until episode 50. Yeah.
And we did the Enneagram in Love.
You guys are such a well-oiled machine. I'm going to be looking at my co-host like, guys, we got to get married to take our game to the next level, all right? Our chemistry is here. We got to get married.
There are advantages.
Yeah. Just taking a little time to just hold each other's hands and look deeply into each other's eyes, I think, is a good move.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like figuring out everyone's love language, too.
Yeah, that's right.
The Gary Chapman book is problematic in a lot of ways.
Big time.
We don't endorse everything about that book. But the vocabulary that book gave us to talk about our podcast
and our needs
Yeah. I really cherish that. Yeah. So what we do with a lot of these self-help books that are troubling, we just go like, well, we're just going to dissect this thing.
We'll act like we're at the cafeteria. We'll take what we want. We leave the stuff that is alarming.
Yeah.
So Ed, Cesar, and Ashley, if any of you guys are listening right now, when I ask you to take the your love language test next week before we record, this is why.
And report back. We're curious. We want to know. We want to know your business. That's the truth.
So I think what makes your show so unique for me, personally speaking, I'm sure a lot of your listeners can. This resonates with them. What makes it so unique from other comic podcasts is the commitment to your namesake. I do remember the first time I came across your show, and I saw the phrase love language combined with Cyclops and Jean Grey, and I was like, wow, that is an interesting pairing, but one that really piques my interest and makes a lot of sense. I think you both do such a good job of analyzing relationships in comics and offering like really insightful perspectives, based on your own observations, but your own like personal things that you guys are going through as a couple, as a married couple at that, and offering that insightful perspective on the medium's approach to not only romance, love, but you guys also study like friendships and family within comics. The latter of that being very evident in your latest series of episodes where you guys explored TMNT Last Ronin. And aside from giving a really good review of the comic itself, you guys also consulted the writings of a doctor who had written a book called, quote, The Sibling Survival Guide, Surefire Ways to Solve Conflicts, Reduce Rivalry, and Have More Fun with Your Brothers and Sisters, which I think one is a great book for, the turtles. And then one I kind of wish I would have had growing up. Maybe it might have reduced some of the rivalries with my own brothers. And I want to know, how do you guys go about picking the couples and then like pairing it with a specific relationship or self-help book? Like what's the thought process behind some of those pairings?
When we started, we actually put a list together of all the couples we wanted to cover and all the couples we wanted to save, so like Don and Norrin were like the first couple we wanted to save. We wanted to save Reed Richards and Sue Storm for a good long period until we did ultimately cover them. And we wanted to save Lois and Clark, which we're
still holding on to. We have not covered them yet.
But as we progressed through the podcast, we kind of got to a point where we really didn't know who we are going to cover until we're wrapping up the couple we're currently covering. We have some ideas. We have some couples that we want to like.
We have couples that we announce and then take back on the next episode.
Right. So for example, after the Ninja Turtles, we had so much fun discussing the Cyber Samurai Ninja Turtles as seen in the Archie comics that we were like, well, we haven't done Archie, Betty, and Veronica. Let's do a three-way. We haven't done a menage a trois.
Yeah, we haven't done polyamorous relationships, open relationships.
Let's do Archie. And then, like, this magical thing happened where we got an opportunity to chat with Robert Kirkman.
For 15 minutes.
minutes.
That is 14 seconds, 59 more minutes than I've ever been able to talk to him.
And when they said, like, would you like to talk to Robert Kirkman for 15 minutes?
We're like, what can we accomplish in 15 minutes?
So he said, what we should do is we should have Robert Kirkman program our coverage of Adam and of Mark and Eve for Invincible. Wow. So let's now actually cover Invincible. So our next couple is going to be Eve and Mark, and Robert Kirkman helps us program it, because the challenge with Eve and Mark is that series is huge. Yep. And we only want to do 4 episodes on them.
And we want issues where it really is Mark and Eve, which are actually rarer than you'd think they are.
Yeah. So when you throw that question to Robert Kirkman, you say, like, do the job for us, he comes up with an answer. That answer is not what we were expecting.
Yeah.
And now I'm like even more excited to cover Invincible on Comic Book Couples Counseling.
But we still haven't chosen the book, the self-help book yet.
We're still working on that.
And the way I program that is I go on Amazon and I just search different self-help books using different combinations of words. And then as I go through them, I find an interesting title and I screen grab it. So I have archived in my phone literally tens of, perhaps hundreds of covers of self-help books, and then I just kind of do a mix and match until I find something that really jives.
The initial idea on the self-help book was we're going to start with the classics or the bestsellers. So that's why we started with the 5 love languages, as retail employees.
Men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
We know what books are really popular. And so when we went to Men are from Mars, Women are from Venus for Saga, for Marco and Alana, we discovered like that book.
Also problematic.
Not just problematic, straight up trash.
Bad. It's not a good book.
Toxic, bad book. And then we were like, well, do we want to like platform all these heinous bestsellers?
Yeah.
Or do we want to find some books that actually might offer something unique to say and positive to say? So we do a little bit more research on that. That's not to say that we still don't find super troubling self-help books.
It's hard. I mean, especially with how we're becoming enlightened over time about, the gender spectrum and the sexuality spectrum, and how can we find a book that is actually inclusive? And I think that that's like an ongoing conversation about these self-help books. Like, can we find a book or even, a handful of books that really do apply and include everyone? And I think this is an area for growth when it comes to publishing.
Yeah.
Did any couple in particular, or maybe book, self-help book, have a significant impact on your personal relationship with each other? Even if it was as far as just making you maybe pause for a second and think, I guess that's applicable to us, or, there's some similarities there. Yo, this is Botter. Sorry for interrupting this episode, but I'll keep it brief. I wanted to let you know about a massive sale we have going on over at the Shortbox store on all of our merchandise and apparel. That's theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com. You can now save 20% off your entire order using the discount code YOO, Y-O-O. So if you've been waiting for the right time to finally buy that gauntlet snapback, or if you ever wanted to buy any of the shirts you see me wear on the podcast, well, now's your chance to get them for a steal. We still have a few sizes left of everything, but they won't last long, and once they're gone, they are gone. And then I mentioned that all of our apparel is screen printed on high quality material. None of that heat transfer or direct to garment stuff. Our shirts are some of the most comfortable ones you'll ever wear, and the hats look even better in person. So wear your support for the Shortbox Nation proudly, knowing that you're going to look damn good doing it. Get to theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com as soon as you can, and don't forget to use that discount code YOO, Y-O-O, to save 20% off your entire order. All of this information can be found in this episode's show notes if you want to get there faster. Thanks for not pressing fast forward. Now back to the show.
I really love the Enneagram. And the Enneagram is one of those, I love putting myself in a category. And I love putting other people in categories. The Enneagram is also not perfect, but it's one of those where I can go okay, I'm an Enneagram 4, I'm an individualist, I have these motivators for myself. I want to be seen as my own person. I want to consider that I want to be on a continuous growth journey. Brad is an Enneagram 7. He's an enthusiast. He loves to search for excitement. He doesn't like to be tied down with too much responsibility, that kind of thing. I really love the Enneagram.
We talk a lot about the 4 tendencies also,
yes.
And I'm very much a rebel tendency, and I do think about that a lot. I'll be going about my day, and I'll react in some way, and I go is that just because I'm a rebel?
Yeah.
Is that why I've responded in such a fashion? And what I find is every episode helps me be a better person, or helps, at least, if not be a better person, helps me explore who I am. And I mostly take away ideas out of those conversations. So another one is, I think this is Brene Brown, but it might not be. But the idea of being a prisoner to the narrative that you are writing.
Yeah, that's from Dr. John Gottman and from Brene Brown.
Okay, thank you.
Brene Brown is the what is the story that you're telling yourself? When you find yourself in this really negative place, or you find yourself really scared or frightened, what is the story that you're telling yourself?
Yeah. And I think about that fiction that I am writing about me and others all the time. It's easy to get in your head and go oh, that person was being a jerk because of X, Y, and Z. And then you realize that X and Z, you have no actual insight into. You've just imagined X and Z. So, slow your roll.
Yeah, and sometimes, the wisdom that we take is not from the self-help book, but from the comic itself. And I feel like we had a breakthrough talking about The Last Ronin, even though that wasn't our favorite interpretation of the Ninja Turtles. Mikey being in this toxic cycle of going my life is not complete until I meet this expectation. My life is not complete until I have this vengeance. As we were talking about it, I thought what if he just decided that that's not true? What if he decided, I don't actually need to fulfill this role that my father set for me. what if he just took that presumption that he's lived with and turned it on its head? Would he feel better? Would he feel different? Would he function differently?
The great thing about that last Ronin conversation was it helped us better understand what we want out of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and the fact that we paired it right after talking about the Archie era and the Cyber Samurai Ninja Turtles, which is a very different look at the future, but still a post-apocalyptic future, but a future where all the brothers are still around.
And they're like middle-aged, and they all have their own lives and their own separate goals, and yet they're still like the Ninja Turtles. They still have this shared identity.
Yeah, and are also able to connect with other people. The fact that like Raphael found love and happiness with Mezcal.
And has become an entrepreneur.
And so you read that and you go like, yeah, that's what I want from Raphael. Raphael was a brooder, and he matured out of being that lone gunman. He matured into appreciating his family, and that allowed him to connect with Mezcal, have a relationship with her. But then you see Raphael in The Last Ronin. Spoilers for The Last Ronin. But Raphael dies in The Last Ronin because he's still a hothead as an old man. And I'm just like, that's not the death I want for Raphael. I want growth. I want hope for that Raphael's going to be more than what he was when we met him when he was 14 years old.
And when we talk about how we would love to redefine Raphael's journey, it helps us think about, how do we want to redefine our journey? Like, do we just want to fulfill the expectations that we had when we were 10? What if these things that make me feel insecure or make me feel like I haven't, done anything with my life, make me feel like I haven't had any accomplishments? What if those expectations I had for myself are actually not true?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a great conversation, that Ronin episode.
Yeah.
But also, not everyone loves it.
We hurt some feelings, and for that, we apologize.
People have very intense feelings about these characters. Yeah. And, respect, because we have intense feelings about those characters. And The Last Ronin's such a popular story. We enjoyed the comic, but we took some serious issues from it as well. And I think, some people didn't necessarily agree with us. And that's okay. That's what the conversation's for.
One thing that you cannot doubt, though, is that your passion for the medium is very prevalent in the way you guys talk about comics. And I'm sitting here like, wait a minute. They're on my... Wait, Butter, you should probably chime in right here. You guys are showing that you can take, like, really good life lessons from comic books. So, I mean, good and bad, right? Like, you should be an adult and be able to decide what you want to apply to your life. But I do enjoy that you guys are looking well past the surface level and even like the level underneath that. I think putting a spotlight on relationships in comic books is such a unique perspective.
Lisa and I treat comics like we would treat any other art form. It's a medium, and it can contain as much depth and passion as anything you see in a movie, anything you see in a book, in a painting, in a video game. Like, all of these delivery systems for narratives have value. And what we do with all our art is we go into it looking for ourselves, no matter what the comic is, and no matter what quality of comic that is either. Like, that's why I like our show so much, is we can read some really trashy comics, and I'm not going to name names here, but if you go through our backlog, you'll see that we have discussed some really trashy comics. But even in those trashy comics, we have found insights that have helped our relationship and helped us better understand the interpretation of those characters, and how these stories can elevate us.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Like, when we were coming up with our format, we wanted to find some... Well, like, I am an extremely insecure person, and I wanted to... and it was hard for me for a long time to feel comfortable in the comics book space. I'm not one of those people who have, this amazing recall where I can name, that's in issue number 69 and this happens.
And any community, there are a lot of gatekeepers around, right?
I was always afraid of the pop quiz. And if I fail the pop quiz, someone will assume that I'm not a fan of comics.
Just rip up your comic book card. Just right there on the spot. I know what you mean.
Yeah. So I wanted to be able to talk about comics in a way where I felt my perspective felt valuable.
Yeah.
And and I've always been a person who loves to talk about themes and messaging and that kind of thing. So like what created our voice as a couple like started as like this insecurity that I had, but I really honestly think that it has become our strength, and it's helped my confidence to go like, oh, you know, like I have something of value to offer to the comic book conversation besides look at all of the Spawn villains I can name, you know?
Cygor, Lisa.
Well said. Yeah, you guys both prove that no matter how trashy the comic book is, there's probably at least one gem to find if you look hard enough, and that's what I like about you two. You guys elevate the medium. You guys look at comic book reviews in just a completely different light, and it's really refreshing, right? To like think about comic books and relationships in comics, which I think gets kind of overlooked. Which leads me to my next question. So I want to know from you two, what are some common or overlapping characteristics of great comic book couples? Like, what makes for a great comic book couple?
I think what makes for a great comic book couple is what makes for a great couple. Open communication, empathy, and like, I mean, and love.
Yeah.
Obviously love.
A genuine curiosity and nerdiness for the, like, you should be a fan of your partner. Like, I think that Brad is like the absolute coolest guy. I think what he says is clever and funny, and I respect his personal mission, and he respects my personal mission.
I'll never forget the date we were on where I either let slip or I cautiously informed Lisa that I had a toy collection. And when she responded like, oh yeah? Like what kind of toys? And I was like, oh, that's nice. And then like since that day that Lisa was like, that's interesting that you collect toys, I was like, not only do I collect toys, but I'm going to collect toys so hard now. My addiction skyrocketed.
I can collect toys and still get laid? Like, whoa.
You thought you couldn't walk through my house without stepping on a toy? Wait till a month from now.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm going to get all those Marvel Legends.
So true. So true.
I think also something that you brought up earlier, and we used the Brene Brown quote, like, what is the story you're telling yourself? One of Dr. John Gottman's things is like, successful couples describe their narrative, like the story of their relationship, as like a triumph. So like if you're a couple who goes like, oh, we've gone through our hardships and we've clung to each other and we've come out the other side and it was wonderful and we just keep, our love keeps growing stronger.
We're victorious.
Yeah. Like those couples succeed where couples go like, oh, we've been through our hardships and it's really worn us down. And like, we don't know what our relationship is going to be day to day, but we continue to like work really hard and we'll just see what happens.
And that's most comic book couples.
So like if we were to just name like off the dome some successful comic book couples, like Don Greenwood and Norrin Rad.
Yeah,
my OTP. I love them.
I would also say one of the most surprising, but certainly one of the most high-functioning couples we've ever covered is Wen and Carmen from The Second Life of Dr. Mirage from Valiant Comics. Those two, they cracked the code.
Yeah.
And there's very little conflict between them. They are working on the same mission. They have the same goals. They have a extremely horny sex life.
Yeah. Another thing for successful couples is like where each couple has a really strong individual identity, but then they have a third identity that is one.
Yeah.
You know? So like
Gwen and Carmen definitely fit that bill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then let's look at the flip side. What are some iconically bad and toxic comic couples?
Well, let's see.
For me, Bruce Wayne and Selena Kyle are I wouldn't say they were necessarily toxic, but I would definitely say that they're non-functioning because they have like, it's okay for individuals to have different principles, but those principles cannot be mutually exclusive.
Like, that's a couple. I hear what you're saying. I understand and appreciate
Don't you
what
challenge me.
Lisa is saying about that couple. But it's also a couple that I deeply love as a couple trying to make it work. The problem with Selena and Bruce is when you're reading their stories, you can't help but also be reading editorials story about them. And because of the canon and the retcon that must always happen, whatever growth that occurs between Bruce and Selena is, reneged.
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating. Now, you can then have like an Elseworld situation where you can tell the rest of that story. And they have done that. And I would say they've done it in satisfying ways and not so satisfying ways. But I do love reading them as a couple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
It's because they're hot and spicy. They're hot and spicy, but I don't think until one or both of them retires, it's not going to work.
It's not that they're hot and spicy. It's that they're deeply flawed. Like,
yeah.
I enjoy characters who are flawed, and the people writing those stories recognize their flaws and want to have a conversation about their flaws. And that's why I like Tom King's run on Batman so much, because he is excavating the internal life of those characters really, really well. But then, like, as you're reading that series, you could also feel like DC going like, well, no, let's not do that. Let's kill Alfred and let's keep him dead.
Yeah.
And that stuff kind of gets in the way.
I think also like imbalanced power differentials. So I would say like Vision and Virginia is a toxic couple, just because he is her creator.
Another Tom King story.
Tom King story.
Tom King should be paying us for this episode.
Agreed. He should sponsor us. But that, like, they never figured out how, like, Vision always felt that he was the teacher of the family and that they should defer to him because he's the one who's lived the longest,
and
literally,
he
built them, So, like, bad power differentials. If, like, any situation where one partner is considered to be more deferential than the other, that's pretty toxic.
I think the Scott and Jean relationship is deeply upsetting as you read it, especially the way we covered it, starting with the Dark Phoenix saga, going to the X Factor issues. Those early X Factor issues where Scott is with Madeline Pryor before we know what's going on with Madeline Pryor. But like the way Scott treats Jean in those issues is insane. And then the stuff he does to Madeline in those issues.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, how can you ever like Cyclops again after reading the first 6 issues of X Factor?
Cyclops is a very, like, black and white type character, and he always had unreasonable expectations for Jean Grey.
When you get later on and we get to the Grant Morrison's run in New X-Men and things get really weird and uncomfortable with the introduction of Emma into that dynamic, like, none of it is, like, healthy, but readable as hell.
The fact that you guys survived or even decided to kick off your podcast journey with exploring the very troubling relationship, up and down relationship of Jean and Cyclops, and survived to tell about it, too, and decided to continue doing more podcast episodes is commendable. Our listeners right now are like, I thought they were just going to talk about comic books and superheroes punching each other in the face. Wrong, listeners. Today you've got homework, right? And that's to look into the mirror, into yourself, all right? Brad and Lisa, I imagine that you guys are a successful podcast. I can imagine you guys get a lot of compliments on the show. I think your production is really done really well. The reviews are really smart. But I got to know, do you ever get any like fan mail or responses from people coming at you from just praising or maybe like, I don't know, like admitting to like, relationship problems or learning things about like themselves, like non-comic book compliments when it comes to the show? Like, do you guys have people hitting you up like, man, I didn't think about that, or hey, that book that you guys talked about really helped me out in my own personal relationship? You guys have any anecdotes like that?
The short answer is yes, definitely, but not as many as I would like.
Our our love language is words of affirmation.
Well,
so we do like to get compliments constantly.
We get lots of great reviews. We have plenty of compliments, but always want more compliments. But I do, we have gotten occasionally people sharing how our conversations on certain episodes have helped them recontextualize their relationships, their own image of themselves.
Just, changing the bar of how they want to be treated or how they want to treat their next partner.
And when we do get those compliments, I mean, it's humbling.
Those are the ones where, I feel truly, seen.
Yeah. And we deeply appreciate them, and therefore we want more of that.
But even if people listen and they're just enjoying the comic book talk, and this is my insecureness talking, and they're just 15 seconds skipping through the entire couples counseling part, more power to you. It's your show. It's your show to listen to, so you can listen to it however you want.
They're like, I don't want to face the truth. 15, 15, 15. Go back to superheroes. Punching.
As long as you're giving us 5 stars on Apple iTunes,
that's all that
whatever.
matters, right?
Live your dream.
Give me a download. I don't care how you listen to it. If you're listening to us on 20 times speed, whatever.
Yeah.
Speaking about words of affirmation, I shared that incredible Tom King quote at the top of the episode. But aside from him, in your 5+ years of hosting the podcast, you two have interviewed a murderer's row of comic book greats like Mark Waid. Kelly Thompson was on the show. You guys had Alex Ross on the show, who I didn't know even did interviews. I thought Alex Ross was like Bill Watterson, who just disappeared and does this, is a hermit. But you guys also had Kevin Eastman, the talk TMNT Last Ronin, on the show, and that's just naming a few. You guys have had a lot of Creator Corner interviews, and then I was curious to know what interviews or conversations of creators stick out or resonated with you the most.
There's so many.
Well, I mean, the truth is, any creator who comes on our show, we love you.
Yes.
I mean, it means everything to us that you would devote any time to chatting with us, because we have such an infatuation for people who put comics out in the world. It is the greatest gift that you could give humanity are comic books, as far as we're concerned. So anybody who comes on and wants to talk about their craft or talk about their characters or talk about the relationships of their characters, we're super thankful for. That being said, I have a special place in my heart for the first creators who came onto our show before we really had any download numbers or we had proven ourselves in any way. So, Tom Scioli came on early to talk about Fantastic Four and his Jack Kirby biography. And when he did that, that gave us an interview that we could then give to other creators see, this is what we've done. We did an episode like this. And we got Stephen Bissett on our show to talk about the saga Swamp Thing.
That was really, really special.
And that was like a pinch me moment, dream come true to chat
Ultimate
Swamp Thing and
moment.
Abby with Stephen Bissett, one of the greats.
Yeah.
And when those 2 interviews happened, suddenly people like Kevin Eastman were willing to accept an email from us. And when Scott Snyder came on the show to talk about his, latest batch of Comixology originals, that changed the game for comic book couples counseling.
First and foremost, he was game to talk about the greater themes and talk about his thoughts on God and creation and everything. He was just so willing to go there with us. And,
in the comic creator world, there are so many lovely and friendly people. We've made friends with these folks, and it's just a beautiful community. I think the comic book community also gets a lot of bad rap because of these little gnats on the fringes, this vocal minority, this angry vocal minority. But the truth is, the comic book community is the most loving community we've ever been a part of.
Just a bunch of sweeties.
Fans and creators alike.
Yeah.
So, to recognize Scott Snyder as being such a sweetie, being game, being willing. And then when we've met him up at cons.
He's been really, really nice.
He did a short video. Him and Greg Capullo did a short little video at San Diego Comic-Con last year saying, watch Comic Book Couples Counseling, even though there's nothing to watch. It's a podcast.
An audio podcast. We didn't correct him.
But he did a little video. The 2 of them said, watch Comic Book Couples Counseling. And that was the greatest gift any creator has ever given us.
It was very sweet.
And
Love a
I
good
watched
shout-out.
that like 8-second clip and I get emotional looking at it.
Yeah.
And he's come back on and, we've had like conversations now with Jeff Smith and
Daniel Warren Johnson.
Tom
He's another
King,
one who
Daniel
really
Warren Johnson.
delivers.
Like all of these guys are, to use Lisa's word, are sweeties.
Yeah.
And it's
Really generous. Generous
Really
with their
generous.
thoughts. Generous with their worldview.
and for the most part, everyone who's come on Comic Book Couples Counseling has been like ready and willing to have these conversations. And, sometimes they're surprised. They're
Yeah.
like, oh, I didn't know we were going to go here.
Yeah.
But here we
We're
are.
not talking about superheroes punching
Yeah,
superheroes?
exactly.
You guys want to know about
exactly.
my love language?
Yes.
So what writer, artist, or creative team do you think embodies the ethos of comic book couple counseling the best through their work? Like, is there any writer or artist that you feel like really puts thought into like expanding and giving a solid relationship and exploring love within comic books and the characters?
I think definitely Daniel Warren Johnson is all about the relationships, is all about,
Yes.
confronting your inner demons, confronting, asserting your power. Like his last Do a Power Bomb, I think, is a masterpiece. His Beta Ray Bill run was so gorgeous.
Murder Falcon. So many tears.
He's writing the conversations that I want to have.
Yeah. That's a great pick.
Yeah, a solid one.
Like, I was thinking also just from like a couple dynamic, again, going back to Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, those guys have a really interesting relationship that when it started, when they first did New 52 Batman together, Scott Snyder had like a specific way of wanting to write scripts and tell stories, and that didn't align with Greg Capullo. And Greg Capullo was like, look, if, I'm not going to just draw your script, Scott. And Scott had to take that criticism, that idea, and go, okay, well now, how will I reshape the way I tell stories to collaborate better with Greg Capullo? And then they found a rhythm through their relationship and became one of the best writer-artist duos around.
Yeah, that's a great example of like a couple has to have that third identity where they become
Well
one
said.
voice. Jeff Lemire and Andrea Sorrentino are like that as well, where when they come together, they are this third thing.
And one of the most adorable comic book creator couples has to be, again, Greg Capullo, but this time with Todd McFarlane.
Yeah.
They have such a long-lasting relationship. They finish each other's sentences. We had them on the show to talk about their Batman Spawn collaboration recently, and it was just so funny to just sit back and let them loose. And they clearly love each other, and they have a shorthand for everything.
Yeah. They're
Man.
cute.
Well said. Very good answer on the Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. I remember reading a couple of those early interviews when they were launching Batman New 52, and it was getting such critical acclaim, and they were talking about their relationship and how it was kind of like a give. And hearing you kind of echo that reminds me that like at the heart of every great comic book couple is a great working relationship, right? Like that keyword being relationship there, and the different gives and takes, and learning one another that you've got to do to produce like really great art. So a really good job of answering that one. This one's more so for Lisa, because Lisa, I appreciate your honesty. I love that you brought up your shortcomings, your own anxiety when it comes to like being in this space of comic books. How has your perspective on comics changed since doing the show? Like, do you view the art form in a different light, or the community or industry in any different way?
To me, like the way my perspective on comic books has changed is that it's a medium that I now approach with gratitude. Like because of the way that we've talked about comics and embraced comics and really embracing the idea that every single comic has something to offer, like, has really opened the world to me in a way where I'm like, I'm free to read anything. I can read anything I want, or I can read the thing that is exactly up my alley and is exactly me. It's all there. In terms of the community, like, the comic book community is just like any community. Like, you have to find your people. And the only way that you're going to find your people is to be utterly and unabashedly and unapologetically, though I do apologize a lot, yourself. You know? Like, if I continue to have the conversations about comics that I want to have and that Brad wants to have, we're going to find the people who want to have that same conversation. If I try to, stress out and really study, before, so that I'm sure I have the mental capacity to become the IMDb of comics.
But even when you know all the characters, Lisa, you just have like a hang up.
Yeah.
Where, like,
oh gosh.
Suddenly it's like, well, who are the Fantastic Four?
I can't even remember. I have like, in baseball, I'm going to use a sports analogy, which is way irresponsible because I'm not a sports person. But like, this resonates with me. The idea of the yips. Like, where, like, a baseball player misses one pitch, and from then on, they get scared every time they're up to bat. I have the yips with proper nouns. I hate saying a name. Like, I just freeze every time I have to say a name of a place, a name of a writer. Like, I just get scared.
I was watching the TV show Poker Face, the new Rian Johnson show.
Yeah.
And in the first episode, Charlie, the Natasha Lyonne character, keeps like freezing on the word locker.
Yeah.
Like, she cannot remember the word locker. And that's like the first time I've seen in a show that kind of thing that you go through where, like, you can see the character in your head. It's Mr. Fantastic. He's married to Sue Storm, but you cannot remember that the name is Reed Richards. And then you do, like, Charlie in Poker Face just like fights her way to the answer.
Yeah.
You do that sometimes.
I do
which
that
is
sometimes.
Adorable.
I have to fight my way to remembering. There's always like a wall. Well, where Brad is the classic nerd who does have that encyclopedic type memory and recall.
And I used to be a real asshole about it.
And he did, and I had to really train him out of it.
And then I realized, oh shit, am I being a gatekeeper?
Yeah, but I mean, even for this interview, like, I have my like little like, do a little Foley art. I have like just a sheet of proper nouns for the things that I love and talk about all of the time, just because I just need my security blanket.
Lisa, I feel you on that. It took me a long time to realize not everything in life is going to be a test that I need to study for. Sometimes you just be. Sometimes you gotta be in the moment.
Yeah.
And I thank you for saving the comic community from one less comic book guy and giving us the awesome Brad that I got to talk to today.
Yeah.
And Brad, this question's for you, and of course, Lisa, you could chime in too. If you could give an aspiring podcaster or a comic creator, considering the fact that you guys have interviewed and picked the brains of so many, if you could give an aspiring podcaster or comic creator one piece of advice based on your experience and interactions with people in the industry, what would that be?
A couple things immediately come to mind. The thing I always say is just do it. The Nike slogan. Just do it.
Just do it.
It took a long time for Lisa and I to just do it. We spent a year talking about comic book couples counseling before we ever recorded one episode because we were waiting to be podcasters. I don't even understand why we took so long. We took a long time and then we just did it. And I would say that about everything. I would say that about, how do I get on press lists? Well, go to the internet. Go to those websites of those publishers. Go to Image Comics. Find the press contact. It's there. Send them an email. You go like, well, I haven't really done any reviews before. I haven't done any interviews before. Just do it. Submit the emails to those publicists. Reach out to people on Twitter or Instagram or Hive or wherever and say, hey, you want to do this thing with me? They'll say no. And you know what? That's fine. Or they'll say yes. And you'll be shocked. You'll be shocked at how many people will say yes, even if you have nothing to back it up. Tom Scioli had no reason to say yes to us. We just asked him. And the other piece of advice is a piece of advice that I just got recently, and
From
I think
Bader? He gave us a lot of advice right before the show.
All that advice I've written down, and I'm going to use all that too.
Yes,
but I've recently started a public access show in Maryland for Prince George's County Television.
Oh, that's rad.
Something I never thought in a million years would happen. But my friend from In the Mouth of Darkness, Brian Young, he works for PGC TV, and he's like, let's do a Siskel and Ebert-like show. And I said, okay. I said, just do it. You asked, I said, yes. It's the most vulnerable thing I've done in a long time. I'm often not happy with my performance on that. Like the moment you put a television camera on me, my brain leaves. And I just cannot be critical in any way, or at least not in a way that I'm happy with it. But my producer on that show, Gina, she said to me that TV isn't clean. And when she said TV isn't clean, what she was saying is, Brad, don't get hung up on all the stumble bumbles that you're doing, reading the teleprompter. TV isn't clean. Every newscast, every show, people are stumbling over their words. Just do it. Yeah. So she told me just do it through the phrase TV isn't clean. I would say that podcasting isn't clean.
Yeah. Like, just to tag onto your just do it idea, just remember, just build a body of work. Like, your first idea for a podcast or for an essay series or for whatever is not going to be your best idea.
Yeah, it's going to
suck.
Yeah.
So this is a quote from Ira Glass, but I go back to it all of the time, and I always misquote it. So here's a misquote from Ira Glass: "Is the main thing that's starting you from building a new skill or starting a new project is your own good taste. Because like when you're a kid and you're like, I'm going to take piano lessons or I'm going to be a painter, you don't care. You don't care that
you're not Van Gogh.
Yeah, that your paintings are shitty and that you're like, you can barely read. You don't care. But then as an adult and you go, oh, I want to be a podcaster. I want to be
David Chen.
I want to be a comic book writer or whatever. You start making your first thing and as you're making it because of your good taste that it is not good. And I think like just keeping it in your mind, the idea of like, well, I'm building a body of work and this is just the beginning.
Well said. And I love that you quoted one of, probably the most famous podcasts, Ira Glass. I was like, leave it up to a podcaster to quote another famous podcaster.
I'm a big appreciator of this medium. I listen to so many podcasts. I listen to all of the podcasts.
Well, I appreciate both of you providing that insight. And normally I end interview episodes here. I'll start wrapping up. But I thought I'd do things a little different and treat our listeners to some, to some extra stuff, right? Like we took off last week. So I want to treat them well. And you two are well-versed in comics and very in tune with what's going on in current comics. I think you two would be great for our next segment. So before we call it a wrap, let's go ahead and grab a fistful of comics.
You can either have a mouthful of teeth or a fistful of comics.
Fistful of Comics. My Short Box Nation listeners know what time it is. Fistful of Comics is a segment dedicated to helping all you comic-curious newbies and regular Wednesday warriors find the best new titles worthy of your time and attention. And, of course, we're lucky enough to have today's comic picks provided to us by Ben Kingsbury. He's the owner of Gotham City Limit, Jacksonville's premier comic shop, and the most excited man you'll ever meet when it comes to helping people take their comic shopping experience to the limit. This guy loves selling and talking about comic books, so it's only right that we get Ben involved. Let's get some music going and see what's on the horizon for comic lovers in the next month or two. So his list starts out strong. We can't talk about great comics you should be reading and not talk about the Big Blue Boy Scout. Take it away, Ben.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, Short Box listeners. I'm Ben K, representing Gotham City Limit, and these are my final order cutoffs you should add to your pull comic list immediately. First up, DC Comics' Superman Lost #1, a 10-part series. Time flies when you're having fun. However, does time fly when you aren't? The hardest part of telling a great Superman story is dealing with his overwhelmingly immense power set. Leave it to Christopher Priest to find a way to make the Man of Steel from an alien species ultimately the most human among us. Bonus nugget, If you've never read Christopher Priest's Eisner-nominated Deathstroke series, go ahead and pick up a copy of that. Now that's taking it to the limit.
As you can tell, Ben is very excited to give some recommendations this week. So excited that he went above and beyond with the homework. And he's giving bonus recommendations on top of the recommendations he already provided. Once again, that was Superman Lost #1. It's written by Christopher Priest with art by Carlo Pagolin. It comes out March 1st. All right, and then comic pick #2 comes from Dynamite Comics. And spoiler warning, it speaks to anyone that's recently enjoyed the recent King Kong movies like I have. Ben, tell us all about it.
Next up, Dynamite Comics presents Kong, Great War #1, World War II. Imagine being lost at sea in the Pacific, facing terror beyond your imagination, monsters from creation's dawn, gruesome, blood-stained death from above and below. You faced death before, but now you must contend with the ape god that knows no master, Kong. Bonus nugget #2. This reminds me of a great story by Avatar Press, Uber, an Elseworlds World War II story that will quite literally take it to your imagination limit.
Ben lives to take people to the limit, and that's what he's doing this week, folks. Once again, that was Kong, the Great War #1. It's written by Alex Cox with art by Tomasa Bianchi. I probably said that one wrong, too. That one is also hitting comic shops March 1st. And last but not least, wrapping up this list just as strong as we started, here's another DC book for you to keep an eye on.
And finally, DC Comics presents Waller vs. Wildstorm, #1 of a 4-part series. Put yourself in the early 80s. Have you ever heard of an ambitious young woman named Amanda Waller? Well, I bet you have. However, as you know, she has her own ideas about how metahumans can serve their country. And apparently honor and dignity don't factor into that. Celebrate Wildstorm's legacy of espionage against the deadliest people in the DCU, including Deathstroke himself. Bonus nugget #3, speaking of the early 80s, my favorite comic book cover of all time is Amazing Spider-Man 238, the first appearance of Hobgoblin, and Gotham City Limit has homaged it for the 3rd time. X-23 Deadly Regenesis #1, coming out March 8th, presented by Tyler Kirkham, a Gotham City Limit exclusive. Make sure you get yourself on the pre-order for that. Well, another week is come and gone. I'm still Ben K, representing Gotham City Limit in Jacksonville, Florida. Remember, with great power comes great responsibility, and always take it to the limit.
There we go, folks. That was a strong list, and I love the shameless plug. You know, anytime Ben's got a variant, a Gotham City Limit variant exclusive, he's going to let you know, and we're all here for it, right? Brad and Lisa, of the 3 options that Ben just shared, which one would you say is most worthy of possibly making it on your pull list?
May I say something about Ben first? What I like about him is that he takes it to the limit, but he doesn't go over the limit, which means he respects boundaries, which is very important in a relationship.
That is possibly the best. I couldn't even expect a better answer coming from you, Lisa. That was excellent. You're right. Ben knows exactly where the limit is, and that's where he's taking you. No further, no less.
Yeah, I'm not here to be challenged.
I bet that the Waller versus Wildstorm series would have a lot of relationship stuff to mine. That would be my guess. Of those 3 titles, that one seems the most ready for comic book couples counseling.
But I want to take that one. Do we have to come up with separate ones? Because if we're coming up with separate ones, can we agree? Maybe we
yes,
agree?
we can all agree.
Yeah, the Amanda Waller versus Wildstorm one sounds good to me. I love espionage. I love plots and schemes. I love a non-superpowered individual in a superpowered world. I think that's an interesting perspective.
But if I was going to be honest about which one of the 3 I'm most excited about, it's Superman Lost. I love Christopher Priest. I think he's a fantastic writer. I'm excited to see him take on Superman. We're in a very Superman headspace right now. Even though we haven't covered Lois and Clark on the podcast, we did recently chat with Joshua Williamson and Jamal Campbell about their Superman #1. We've had a chance to read that issue. If you want to put something in your pull box that is great and that is Superman related. If you're picking up Superman Lost, make sure you've got Superman #1 from Williamson and Jamal Campbell on there, because it is a great Superman first issue, an awesome place for people to jump on. People are excited about all the DCU news. They want to get back on board with Superman. I think both of these books are a good place to start.
Yeah.
Awesome. Listeners, you're getting a bunch of bonus recommendations today, all right? Free of charge at that. I will go ahead and chime in and make this a unanimous decision. I am very excited for Waller versus Wildstorm. I was excited for it when it was first announced, but it was recently pushed out due to I think scheduling and all that. A few reasons why I'm excited for this. One, it's a Black Label book, and I have gone on record saying I think these Black Label books have been some of the best things coming out of DC. I think there's something about the creative freedom that is being allowed to these writers and artists, and it doesn't hurt that Marie Javins, right? Marie Javins is the editor-in-chief. The other exciting thing about this is that the writers are two names I'm not familiar with. You got Spencer Ackerman, who was a national security reporter, and he's written books about like espionage and like Reign of Terror. And then you've also got video game writer Evan Narcissi, I believe. But he's written on Spider-Man Miles Morales, the new Gotham Knights game. So a good mix of like someone that knows like real deal espionage and national security stuff, and a video game writer, someone that's written like Miles Morales is a great game, great story. And of course, Eric Battle is doing the artwork. So I'm looking forward to this. And I think, we rarely get all three of us agreeing on, we rarely get 3 consecutive votes on one comic book. So listeners,
so
look,
technically, I think Brad, you chose
he did dip
Superman.
his toe on Superman.
Yeah.
I'm also
Right.
excited about anything that's Kong related. So.
Let's be honest, all 3 are going to be in our pull box
They're strong.
because we don't
They're
have
strong.
restraint.
You're on the right place then, Lisa. All right, folks, that's our segment. If any of those titles grabbed your attention, go hit up your local comic shop and get your pre-orders in now. A big shout out to Ben for the help this week. And remember, even if you don't live in Jax, you can still take it to the limit by shopping at GothamCityLimit.com for comics and exclusive variants, like the one that Ben just mentioned. They're doing a exclusive Tyler Kirkham variant of X-23 Deadly Genesis #1. It's going to be that Hobgoblin homage cover. You can go ahead and pre-order that by going to their website. There'll be a link in the bio. With that being said, though, that also marks the end of the show. Lisa, Brad, I want to thank you so much for being a part of the show. It was a fantastic conversation. I'm probably going to have a really deep talk, really deep look in the mirror today and really find out, what motivates me and keeps me going. So I'm so glad I was able to finally meet you two and have you guys on. I'll have links to your podcast and socials in the show notes so everyone listening can find you guys, which I highly recommend you do so. Give them a subscribe. But would you care to leave us with any parting words or tell us what's next for the podcast? What other couples will you guys be exploring next?
Ooh, we're really excited for what's coming next.
Yeah, so we've already teased the Invincible episodes with Robert Kirkman. We just finished up the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series. But our next week's episode, is another conversation that we never thought we were going to have, and is kind of like a weird way of... What's the word I'm looking for? It's not cyclical, but like it's going back to what started everything.
Yeah.
Do you want to say it?
We got Dan Slott to talk Norringrad and Don Greenwood with us, and he was super generous.
Awesome.
The interview is already in the can, so as long as the cloud doesn't explode, that will be, I'm a worry ward.
Yeah, we have lots of copies, Lisa.
I don't feel safe until the episode is out, but
it is a in-depth conversation with Dan Slott.
Full spoilers, so you're going to want to read the comics.
About Silver Surfer. So it is Silver Surfer focused. We sadly don't get to talk about Superior Spider-Man. We don't get to talk about She-Hulk, things that we love. This is a Silver Surfer obsessed episode. And we're biased, but it's one of the best conversations we've done on the podcast.
It's so fun. It's like a second opinion on the relationship analysis we did back episodes 50 through 53, but this is from the man himself, or one of the men. We still need to get Mike Allred
and Laura
Allred, but I think he has
They're
a
great.
valuable perspective on the story.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And from what I know of what I've seen of Dan Slott interviews, he seems like someone that's just happy doing what he does.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to hear his thoughts and hearing your excitement. I mean, you guys just talked about how Norn Rad and Don meant to you guys. So I'm excited to hear that myself.
Yeah, it's really cool.
There you have it, Shortbox Nation. Thank you for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Do me a favor and give my friends Brad and Lisa a follow if you're looking for another great comic podcast to add to your rotation. If you enjoyed this episode, and I mean, of course you did, right? Help us spread the word to other comic fans. Leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'm telling you right now, it'll be the easiest review you ever left in your life, and it would mean the world to us. Ed will be joining me next week alongside Guido and Rob, who are the host of another great comic podcast called Dear Watchers. We're going to be talking about Kang the Conqueror because it's time to get hyped for the new Ant-Man movie. That'll be next Wednesday. But if a week is too long for you to wait and you start to suffer shortbox withdrawals, head over to our Patreon community for way more content and bonus episodes that'll hold you over. Me and Drew just recorded an episode flipping through this month's previous catalog, looking at all the coolest stuff on Earth. Stop thinking of supporting the show and just join our Patreon community already. You know you want to, and I promise it's worth the investment. Hit the support this show link in this episode show notes or go directly to patreon.com/theshortbox. In the meantime, take care of yourselves, enjoy your comics, and please continue to make mine and yours Shortbox. We'll talk to you next week. Peace.